We will call the meeting to order. You received copies of the minutes. Any corrections or emendations?
I'll make the motion, we approve the minutes.
Nissen moves. I will second the motion. Discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. The bills are been presented. Any questions, comments, or is there a motion?
I'll move on the bills.
Alman moves. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Berg seconds. Discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Cancellation of warrants. There's one warrant.
Move to cancel.
Nissen moves.
I'll second.
Alman seconds. Discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion hereby carried. And we will begin right now with Corinne. Please. Good morning.
All right. Good morning. Today, I'm here to present my annual report, and the areas that I'm covering today will be mental health, which will be both the adult and children's mental health, as well as adult protection. And what I gave you, I think you have a handout as well as maybe in your Dropbox, a graphic that really looks at, we talk about case managers and social workers and what they do, and I just think this is a nice graphic that really lays out what are the steps and the processes that our workers take on a daily basis with clients. And if you look at it, if you start with the assessment piece, and that is really looking at the diagnostic assessment. As you guys are aware of, any case that we do in mental health starts with a diagnostic assessment. We have to be able to have that diagnostic assessment that's going to make them eligible for our case management services. In adult mental health, that is a statement of being seriously and persistently mentally ill. In children's, it's that severe emotional disturbance. And so from that DA, we begin the assessment process with that client. We're really looking at what's going on for them, what are those functions, what's happening for them, and we complete what we call a functional assessment. And that assessment is about really sitting with the person and being able to talk through what's going on for them. It's really looking at what are those mental health symptoms that are going on, looking at is there any drug or alcohol usage? What is their education? Their education, looking at vocational needs. Are they working, not working? On really being able to address what's going on for them. What is that social functioning? How are they getting out? Are they interacting? What are some of their leisure things that are going on? And how is their mental health affecting their ability to be able to do those things? And it's really looking at that person as a whole, and looking at that person and starting where they're at, starting with what they want to work at, being able to look at what they believe their struggles are and how they need help and what they're asking for. Adult mental health and children's mental health are voluntary services. So it's the person who's asking for those services and being able to make that request for help. And then our job in that is being able to start with that assessment, to be able to sort through what are those needs and how can we begin to look at walking alongside them to address those needs. Those next steps that happen then is that planning is really, we're required to put a plan together with a client. In the adult world, it's called the Individual Community Support Plan. In the children's world, it's called the Individual and Family Community Support Plan. And what we're looking at in that is really looking what are the goals. From that assessment that we've done, what are we going to identify the areas that they have the most challenges in possibly, or what are their strengths and how can we build on those strengths? And along that line, how are those things able to assist in their mental health and working towards recovery? Those plans are required to be done in the first 30 days. And so we work with the client in developing those plans, being able to develop those goals, and again, starting where the client is at and being able to set goals that they want to work on and how can we help and assist in making them, help them to meet those goals. The next piece then is that once we've established that plan, it's what kind of resources, what kind of referrals, what's that linkage that we can assist them with to make it possible for them to reach those goals. That may be what are some of their natural supports. How do we assist them maybe in family development or in other relationships to be able to have supports that help them along the way. And then also referrals and linkage to services. What kind of providers might be able to have a service that's going to help them to walk along with them as well to be able to gain completing their goals and being able to address that. And then the next is that monitoring and coordinating. It is really then how do we continue to walk alongside them? How do we help them look at their goals on a regular basis, be able to look kind of that trajectory of where are they at and what are blocks or challenges that are keeping them from meeting those goals. And then on how do we, again, assist in that and monitor. Are the services that we've made referrals to, are those working? Is that helpful? Is everybody consistent in what the goals are and where the client is wanting to go and being able to do that? And those 4 boxes, if you will, are ongoing on a constant basis. And we may identify a new situation that happens when we're monitoring. So then we're back to assessment, and then we're back to looking at what are those goals for that new issue, and how do we develop referrals and plans and those sort of things with that. And so it's a constant, ever-flowing situation that we're doing when we're in the mental health component for for both the children as well as adults. I'm going to kind of break down, some of the things that are kind of highlights, if you will, from the 2018 as it relates to each of the different areas. I'm going to start with the adult mental health, and I'm going to identify the workers. And those who are here, Carrie Boltice, just stand. Carrie, why don't you tell us how many years you've been with the county?
I've been with the county for 4 years.
Okay. And Virginia is not able to be here. And Virginia does some adult mental health. Majority of her work is on chemical dependency, and she'll be here next month when we talk about that. Amanda Olson will probably be running in, and she is doing a court conference call in a court situation in another county. And so Amanda, and then Carrie, Virginia, and Megan. And Megan also is not here. Megan is out on leave. She just had twins last week. And so our family is growing. And then we have Andrea Mossberg. Andrea is our case aide. How many years, Andy?
32.
Oh my.
32 years. 32 good years.
Yeah.
Some of the highlights for our adult mental health, we served 204 people who received adult mental health case management services in 2018. That number is a bit of a decrease from 17, but very consistent with 16. And we see those numbers stay fairly consistent, a little bit up and down from year to year. As addressed, case management can look very different for each person. That we can be in a situation where that person may just need some simple help to be able to make those referrals, be able to make those connections, be able to talk through what those needs are, all the way to a situation of someone who needs commitment and needing to be at Anoka, for example. And everything in between happens in our case management. When placement is needed, that obviously is an increased level of involvement with the workers and the person, and being able to look at what are appropriate referrals that we need to be making, appropriate services that need to be happening, appropriate placements. Our commitments, we've completed, in 2018, we completed 40 pre-petition screenings for the civil commitments. And just to review that, as you're aware, the commitment is a process where that's the involuntary part of some of the work that we do. And that is where there's been a statement in support of the commitment. Someone is a danger to themselves or others, and we need to do what we call the initial pre-petition screening, where we're looking at what are the facts that we know about what's been happening for that person, what are the behaviors that are creating that danger to themselves or others, what are family members seeing, friends seeing, and is there law enforcement involvement. All of those sort of things are looked at in that pre-petition screening, and then we make the determination as a team as to if we would support a commitment or not. If supported, then that goes to the county attorney's office, and the whole court process then occurs. And we, like I say, we did 40 of those. It's pretty consistent past like the last 3 years in how many commitments we're doing. And if we stay on the same track as we are right now for the first part of 19, I would assume that those numbers will be higher. One of the things that we need to look at when we've seen an increase in what we call the Rule 20s, which is part of the civil commitment, and that Rule 20 is when the person has committed a crime. And out of that crime in the court process, it's determined people are questioning if they are able to be competent enough to understand the court process. And then there's an examination that happens, and out of that examination, the recommendation may be that there is question about their competency and that there is a need to follow with the court or a commitment process. And that commitment process then kicks in similar, it's the same process of the pre-petition screening. If we believe they reach that level of needing to be committed, and then there's the whole court process that happens with those. One of those challenges, and I know you guys have heard about and talked about, is that a lot of those Rule 20s, those are people who are sitting in jail. And our need to be able to process those and be able to come up with the best plan of treatment for them and what makes the most sense of that. We've had a variety of people throughout the 2018 who ended up in different hospitalizations. Those hospitalizations can be anywhere from a private hospitalization, Rice Hospital, for example, or Caris Health, and also looking at ANOCA. And ANOCA is the state-operated residential treatment program. And so we've had a few people throughout the year 2018 that have been there, and obviously that creates challenges for us to be able to get those people out and be able to assess what those needs are and being able to try to find that step down. And those are the challenges that are not new. I've been here and discussed those challenges before about that step down piece and the difficulty in being able to find appropriate step downs. And so it's people are staying in the hospitals longer than they need to be staying because of the lack of those resources and options for them as step downs. Workforce is, again, in our adult mental health as well, and I'll talk in our children's mental health, is continuing to be an identified issue for our providers. We're having more and more wait lists, more and more lack of services, if you will, and some of that being because of workforce issues. Our providers not being able to provide the service, like PCA, for example, not being able to provide that service because they don't have the workforce to do it. Some of our mental health providers having difficulty in filling every level of positions that are available. And of course, that obviously has a direct effect on our clients that we deal with and our ability to help them to plan and our ability to make referrals and be able to support them through that, through the wait list process in that time frame. And we have good partnerships in adult mental health. Our partnerships are obviously our providers, our county attorney's office, law enforcement, the state. And I would say that we have good working relationships with those partners. And in fact, the state has identified us as being a good partner and able to work together to be able to identify what are the needs of that client and how do we work together as partners to be able to work forward on what's best for the client. Next is our children's mental health. Does anyone have any questions as far as the adult mental health?
Mr. Chairman, I have a question, Karen. Could you explain, what the process, how people come in, contact the county, or they're referred by, in case if they're arrested, apprehension for criminal activity, then the evaluation takes place in the Rule 20. But how and why does a person call or contact the county to get the assistance to get control of their life, or how does that process work, or how does it go? Well,
generally what happens is for the voluntary services, And that's generally either a referral is made to us. So maybe a person has been working with a therapist and the therapist is really feeling they need more coordination, that ability to help do assessing what those needs are, looking at making a plan and looking at other referrals. So some of those may be, for example, the therapist or the providers that they're currently working with will make those referrals. Or people will come in and ask for the service. They're struggling, they're feeling they just need to be able to have someone walk alongside them to help them focus, to help be able to get involved with services. And so those are the voluntary ones. The commitment ones, those are someone has made a statement in support of commitment. Typically it may be somebody, for example, who's at Rice. Mental health unit, and they're on a hold, and then they're not able to level out enough in that during that hold time, and so the provider is making the statement in support of commitment, believing that they're a danger to self or others. And again, the Rule 20, those are through that criminal process, and that's how they get to us.
All right, thank you.
I don't know if that answers.
No, that helps. Thank you very much.
Okay. Other adult mental health?
Most of the hold orders, they go to Rice. Does the crisis center do hold orders anymore?
Most of them are Rice. Once in a while, the crisis center will do those holds. Yeah, but most of them are coming to us from Rice.
Okay.
Yeah, and majority of those holds, people don't need further involvement. Rice is able to set up good discharge planning, get appointments, and those sort of things up. And some of those will be referrals, obviously, to us after that hold. And then some of them turn to the commitment process. Other questions on the?
Otherwise, proceed with children's.
Okay. Children's mental health. And for children's mental health, we have Luke Norby. How many years, Luke?
I've been with the county for 15 years and children's mental health for 5.
Okay. And Rain Hedlund.
Been with Candy Rock County for 5 years.
Kelsey Rooney.
I've been with the county for just about 4 years.
And Malia Rademacher is our other, and she is out this morning. And then Pam Meinert is our case aide, who's been here for 30-some years as well, 31 years. And she's out ill today. And so those are my children's mental health workers. And as far as children's mental health in 2018, we did see an increase in the number of cases. And this is probably our biggest trend and our biggest issue right now in my unit is the number of increase that we've had in our children's mental health cases. We went from 68 being the average cases in 2017 to 103 in 2018. Generally, the requirement is that our case management numbers, our caseload sizes should be 15. We have been at 20 for a number of months now, and we see that as being the trend, and that we really need to begin to look at closer and be able to sort through how we get on top of that. And obviously, when you have that amount of cases, it's very difficult. You really are in crisis management is what we're doing in that. And obviously, that can become very frustrating. Frustrating for the workers, but also frustrating for the families when it is truly just crisis management and it's not that ability to do some of the things that we were talking about as far as that planning and referrals and what's new and what are some new ideas and new things that we can be able to work with families on. And the workers work very hard at trying to do all of those case planning, all of those steps that we just talked about, but it becomes very difficult when you have those caseload levels. And we're seeing, as well as our providers, seeing a real increase in the acuity of cases, and that kids are in a situation where their mental health needs are getting higher. They seem to be much more higher levels, more aggressive behaviors, more running, more suicidal threats, and just lots of usage on social media being a real issue for a lot of our kids. And so across the board, we're seeing with not only ourselves, but with our providers, seeing an increase in those behaviors. I know when Rochelle will come and do some PAC4 things and talk about the survey that PAC4 does, but it's very interesting to see the increase of the kids who are identifying anxiety and depression on a daily basis, and the issues that is creating for them. And we're seeing that in our caseloads as well. We're also seeing in children's mental health, and in particular, we saw that increase in 2018, is the kids are coming to us much younger. It used to be our caseloads were that 14 and up. Now we have a variety of cases that are 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds, 7-year-olds, and that are at, again, that high acuity level when they're getting to us, who families are very frustrated, they don't know what to do anymore, and it creates some very safety issues for those kids, which kicks in a higher level of need of what we need to be doing and working with families on. And so it used to be you wouldn't even think about in children's mental health placing a 5, 6, 7-year-old, but we are. Because of the level of need that these kids are having and truly the burnout and the frustration that the families are having to not knowing what to do. And those placements can be anything from a respite weekend to give everyone a break to needing residential care, which is your longer term placements. Again, similar to the adult workforce is an issue with our providers, our in-home services. I know we have an intensive in-home position that Woodlands has been trying to fill for over a year. And so that's obviously, it's the trickle down then that happens with that. Talking about the placements, you're probably aware of the psychiatric residential treatment facilities. That's the new program that the state gave approval for back in 2017. There is one that has opened, and it's in Duluth. It is, I believe, last I checked, in March, there was like 64 people on the wait list. I believe that has decreased. So it's a very good program that I think has a level of need of care that we need for a lot of our people. It's that inability to, again, get them into those placements. And I know with the current legislation, they slow down the process of developing more of those beds. Again, in children's mental health as well, we have good partnerships. We work well with our providers, our school systems, our workers are involved in school meetings, and obviously with our providers and those, and being able to really kind of wrap ourselves around that child and that family, and being able to sort through what are those needs and how can we as a team be able to work together with the family and the child to be able to make some gains and look towards recovery in some of their mental health issues. Questions on the children's mental health? Oops.
Corinne, as you identify younger kids, the severity is increasing. What correlation, and this is maybe not, I'm not expecting an answer, but I'm going to suggest that there are some correlations with social media, there are some correlations with screen time, there are some correlations with the entire stressful environment that each of us is in every single day, whether it's news, whether it's weather, whether it's whatever. It's the anxiety. You don't have to, if you listen to any media or read any media, I don't care what it is, stress emanates. Mm-hmm. And it appears that there is no chance to disconnect, to step back. Without being harsh in a sense, in all due respect to the females, look, we talk about the hockey mom, the helicopter parents, and I'm just wondering if, whether it's hockey moms or hockey dads or whatever, the necessity that kids are on the go 24/7. I just have to look at school and community activities. There's 7 days a week, almost 24 hours a day. I look at the schedules of when they're doing. So is this something that it comes up in conversations? Is this something that we're thinking about as what the profound effect is down the line, and if it is in any way significantly connected and we can identify that, are we doing anything about it?
I would agree with you that I think social media is creating a mental health issue for a wide variety of children. And is that just it? No, obviously. And I think, when I think of like bullying, for example, kids go to school and they used to be bullied at school, and then they'd be home and they'd be safe at home, or they wouldn't have to be part of that at home. Well, now with social media, it's constant. It's, like you say, 24/7, some of those things. And for some of our children's mental health, that social media is also an avenue to get themselves in trouble. It's an avenue of talking to people that they shouldn't be talking to, the avenue of sending naked pictures to people they shouldn't be sending naked pictures to, and all of those sort of things. So I think social media is definitely playing a role in that. Obviously, there's all sorts of tons of positive things about social media as well, but it is playing a role in some of our mental health situations. Again, like you say, at all levels, not just our kids, not just our parents. It's all of us. Social media is playing a role in our mental health.
I don't mean to suggest that it's the only cause by any means, but it's a symptom of, I think, busyness in a sense, and clearly in the last 10 years particularly, the curve is almost vertical. It was relatively stable. Sure. Even it was unknown, but we've seen such a dramatic increase in that caseloads and how much go on there. There's things, so from a provider standpoint, from a parent standpoint, I think we need to have that on the list to clearly talk about and do it in a very honest and open manner, rather than just saying, well, boys will be boys or girls will be girls. Doesn't work that way.
And I think for some of our kids, it's not that the social media isn't creating their mental health issue, their SED issue, yes, but it's enhancing some of the difficulties that they have because of that.
Yeah, I realize it doesn't cause autism,
right,
in all that.
But again, you're absolutely right. It definitely is playing a role for all of us. We all have mental health, and social media can have an effect on that.
Well, thank you for the discussion. Thank you.
Okay.
Questions on children's? Otherwise, then, Corky, do you have a question?
Well, both for children and adult. I was just, a question might be hard to answer too. What are some of the common diagnoses nowadays in both adult and children's mental health? Or is it still the whole gamut?
It's the whole gamut. It's your schizophrenia and post-traumatic, your depression, anxiety, ADHD, other thoughts. Autism, that's a really good point to be made, that I should have had in there. It's really, we have seen that increase in the autism. Now, is that because there's more kids with autism, or that it's we're better able to identify some of those? But that definitely is, we're seeing that very frequently. We're seeing that as the identified issue. And again, with limited resources that really address the autism piece of it. Other thoughts on diagnosis? Okay.
Thank you, Corinne.
Okay. That answer your question?
Sure.
Okay. Next up is the area of adult protection, or vulnerable adults, as you may have heard it to be called. And we have Leonda Gottwald. And Leonda, you've been here
2 years.
2 years. And we have Jennifer Eager. And Jennifer's been here a year and a half. So that tells you that we have new, high-energy workers that are involved in our adult protection. What we did in 2016, as you may remember, as we've discussed before, that level of cases that we had coming into adult protection were really large, and the difficulties of that for one person to manage to investigate and be on top of that and meet our timelines. We were really struggling with that. And so in 2018, we added Jennifer to our adult protection team. And so now we have 2 people who are doing adult protection for the county. And they're a good team. They work well with each other. They bounce off on each other ideas and suggestions and ability to process through cases and to do investigations together. And we have seen that when you look at 18 numbers, we were able to see that some of those numbers decreased. And I believe some of the reason that those numbers decreased is because of the fact that we added a position. We've been able to help and address people's needs better. And so it's not just putting out the fires, it's that ability to be able to go back out to that vulnerable adult, do a little more case management, if you will, of that, to be able to make those connections with families as appropriate, looking at those service providers, being able to do some follow-up with them. Whereas prior to adding the new position, it really was putting out fires. It was doing the immediate risk thing. And so I think what we've seen and what we've been able to see is that we have a decrease in the repeats, the decrease in the reports that are coming in on the same person within a short amount of time. And I truly believe that adding that position and that ability to do more of that, a longer involvement with that VA has allowed us to cut down and to see the decrease in the assessments. What we have seen an increase is in what we call our emergency protective services. What happens is when a person makes a report, whether that's an individual person or a mandated reporter, they are asked the question is, do you believe that there's an emergency need for this? Will someone in the next 72 hours be in a dangerous situation, whether that's from health, lack of health, you know, that inability for them to protect themselves. Excuse me. And we have seen an increase in the requests for that. What we have to do is then we have to make that within the 24 hours, being able to make that determination on whether seeing them or making the determination that it isn't an EPC situation. In an EPC situation, that may come in a case or a situation that we're not even having the investigative role in. So, for example, the ones that the counties are responsible to investigate are the community, where it is a perpetrator is a community person or it's the VA themselves who's self-neglecting. Whereas if you have someone who's in a facility that's licensed by the Department of Human Services, the Department of Human Services is the investigating agency, and the Department of Health is the investigating agency for people who are in the facilities, and your alleged perpetrator is a staff person, for example. But an EPC or an EPS would be a situation, so maybe it's somebody that in a nursing home, for example, and there's a staff person that's alleged to have done some maltreatment to that VA. We may get the EPC on that because the state isn't in a position to be able to come out and do an immediate response to that. So we would do that immediate response to make sure that there's immediate safety. That may be a phone call to the provider and processing through what the report is. The provider saying, we have the information, we're doing our own internal investigation, and that person is on leave until investigation is completed. Well, obviously, the provider has done the safety needed to deal with that immediate safety or risk to not only that VA, but maybe to other VAs. And so that would be an example where we would just be doing the emergency protective service piece of it. We wouldn't be doing the investigation in that situation. When we have family members, for example, may sometimes say, yes, I believe my parent is at risk, and really when we begin to assess that and work through that, it really isn't, but that EPS is given to us from MARC, from the reporting system, and we have to make that decision and screen those reports to see what steps we need to take to assure that it's not an emergency situation. So we have seen an increase in the number of emergency protective service requests. Self-neglect and financial exploitation continue to be our highest allegations. I don't know if I've done my soapbox here or not about self-neglect, but we really continue to challenge the state on how we look at self-neglects. Self-neglects are treated in our process of investigation the same way you treat a sexual abuse of a vulnerable adult. The steps, the timelines, the requirements are making a determination is the same. And so we really are challenging the state to really look at that. And I know that they are, to look at, is there a different track that we can do with self-neglects? There are obviously protection issues that come with people who are self-neglecting themselves, but how can we look at that differently as to how we respond to that? It really, making a maltreatment determination against a vulnerable adult who has self-neglected themselves doesn't make sense. And so really challenging them to look at that and to see, kind of similar if you think about child protection and when you hear about the traditional investigations versus the family assessment, being able to see, is there ability to do two tracks in that and how we address those and the need for a determination to be very different. So that is something that we're challenging and suggesting and working. One of the things you have to remember with DHS, there are a number of staff. Adult protection is kind of the new and upcoming, if you will, and the number of staff that they have at the state level is very, very limited for the work that needs to be done. And so I think they're challenged to be able to look at some of those things as well. Obviously, we have more vulnerable adults in the community than we ever have, which is a good thing. But then that obviously opens up the possibility of the increase in the adult protection areas. Scams are continuing to be a real difficult situation. And scams in situations where we're not even able to have that person identified as a vulnerable adult. And I think scams can also be very frustrating for our workers from the angle of you can't get to that perpetrator. You can't get to confronting that and being able to address that. And so that gets frustrating as well. And as law enforcement will tell you, they've seen a major increase of that through this last year. Questions on the adult protection?
I'm just curious, 225 community reports, 110 were assigned for investigation.
What that means?
What happened to those 110?
Yep. And what happened, so community reports, again, are those that we're required to screen and determine if they meet the statutory requirement to do an investigation on. So we had a total of that 225 was total of all reports that got passed on to us from the reporting system. And then out of that, 110 met that criteria, the statutory requirement to go out and to assess that. And so those others were screened out, is what we call those.
I follow that, but what happens to what's the final answer on the 110? Do they get put into a situation, different situations? I see guardianships down here.
Yes. Yep. And what happens in that is that obviously we go out and we look at what is that allegation. We're having conversations with the vulnerable adult. We're assessing what their functioning levels are. What is their ability to keep themselves safe? And we're talking to family members, if there's family members. We're talking to the perpetrator. And we're gathering medical records if need be, or banking records if need be. And we're looking at that to see, so again, depending upon your allegation, we're looking at that allegation and being able to determine, we have to make that determination. Did it occur? It's substantiated. Is it inconclusive? We're really stuck at that 50-50 where we can't necessarily tip it one way or the other. Or is it false, that we were able to say that it's false, which is the majority of our reports come out as a false determination. And then based on our findings, based on what we do in an investigation, then we're making those referrals as appropriate. So maybe they need some home health services that we can make referrals for and begin to set up services that are appropriate for them. There are some, though, that the person isn't in a position, their capacity is such that they're not able to keep themselves safe, they're not able to make good decisions, and so in those, we may go for a guardianship situation. What we've really found through the past few years is guardianship isn't necessarily the answer either. And so we're really looking at more of that supportive decision-making and how can we help kind of wrap people around that person to be able to assist that person in making decisions that are appropriate for them, that keep them safe. We also, on a regular basis, we're really, frequently we may be in a situation with an elderly, for an example, who doesn't want to leave the house, doesn't want to go into a facility. And then we're really having some of those conversations about when will you know it's time to go? And how do we begin to develop that plan? If it's not now, how do we begin to work with you to know on helping you to identify when you're going to know it's time? Financial exploitation, those are really gathering those records, the financial records, really working with law enforcement on a lot of those to be able to try to establish on what has or hasn't happened as far as financial exploitation, and then how do we go about making that safe? Maybe it's a situation where it's getting a rep payee for that person. Maybe it's a situation, obviously the whole gamut of criminal charges that could come from a financial situation. And so each case is so different based on that person, based on the supports that person has, based on the allegations. And so our goal, obviously, is to make them safer, to prevent further maltreatment.
Some of these categories of abuse, physical, sexual abuse, financial exploitation, are criminal nature. So how many of these 110 get charged? I'm not the people, but the people who are doing
the perpetrators get charged?
Yeah.
I would say a limited number get charged.
Okay.
It's difficult, particularly if you have someone who is incompetent to be making decisions and keeping themselves safe. It's also difficult to get a clear picture. And obviously in a criminal situation, you need to have that evidence, that proof. And so sometimes we get stuck here and not necessarily enough to tip it to be a situation that is chargeable.
Okay.
I don't know if that answers your question.
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Good discussion. Thanks, Corinne. You talked about enforcement and making people accountable for their actions against vulnerable adults. Are we in any way, we're still, does Renville County participate in any services jointly in our Health and Human Services Department regarding this, or do they have their own investigative people down there?
They have their own investigative people.
Right.
The cases that we do are Kansas County on residents.
Okay, only.
Yep.
All right. I guess my question is to, I don't know how the funding is and investigation process, but with the growing population of adults, we all know what's coming. Mm-hmm. That there seems to be, we're going to have to concentrate some more efforts on maybe consolidation of services to better serve the people in a more regional way. And I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts on that, if the state is moving in that direction, or if they're requesting that, or we're all going to have our own little silo.
Well, I know that there are some counties within our region, Chippewa, Swift, there's 4 of them, I can't think of them off the top of my head, that do share an investigator who, because their numbers are lower, that it isn't necessarily individually enough to be a full-time position, but yet if you can get that full-time position, then you have that expertise. You gather that expertise and you grow that expertise. And so what they're doing is in a joint situation of an individual worker that works throughout all of those counties. we're at a level where our numbers are such that to take on another counties, we'd obviously have to be adding staff to do that.
Okay. I'm just wondering if you have discussions on planning that, because this is going to be a big tsunami coming at us, and just wonder how we're going to prepare for that. I mean, I don't know if the state is fully conscious and our representatives are conscious of what's going on. I know that they hear a lot about it, and I'm sure, I'm just wondering if the efforts, in your professional opinion, are being coordinated so that we might be able to better deal with the future.
And I think, like I said before, I think this is kind of the up and coming area in the topic. Obviously, the state has had multiple focus, lots and lots of focus on the vulnerable adult as it relates to our facilities. And you've seen that through the last couple of years, the number of reports on the lack of investigations that have happened due to staffing issues, and I think we've really seen an increase in what they're doing in those areas, and identify that, and that helps us as well. If that just the education and that ability to have a vulnerable adults and adult protection on the forefront, obviously there's a trickle down for us as well in that. And so I think it's ongoing, needing to be able to figure out, like you say, because it's coming, it's here, and it's going to come even more so, to figure out how to best handle that. I also think, though, it's more of a discussion now than it's ever been. I think it's more of a community discussion than it's ever been before. More and more people's parents are now fitting into this area, and so there's more and more conversation happening, not only just in the agencies, but also in the community as well, which obviously is a positive.
Jenny?
In legislation, there was money that was put aside for the state to have their own investigators. So that would be for the DHS facilities that Corinne was talking about. So I know that there's a huge influx that we'll be seeing in those investigations. And then also assisted livings, they have new requirements and kind of are going to be graded like nursing homes. So I think some of those will be hopefully on the forefront of the state, being on top of this huge influx of the seniors we're going to be seeing in the baby boomer generations. And then in terms of counties, there is some language. We just haven't seen what that really looks like for our county, but it does talk about some money that will be appropriated to our investigators. But again, there hasn't been any criteria that we've seen.
What that looks like, is still up in the air, sort of a thing.
Yep.
Right. And using the assisted living as an example, right now it's our responsibility to do investigations in assisted living because they're not technically licensed by the state at all. That's the change that we'll be looking at, is that they'll become licensed, and then our assumption, hopefully, is that will be on state agencies that will be doing those investigations.
Thank you.
There was some good that came out of that boondoggle at the Department of Health.
Yes.
There was some good that came out. It raised the conversation. It made some corrections. Until that discussion really hit, most of us did not know the assisted living facilities are not licensed. I did not know. Right. I knew all the other. There's a multitude of licenses. I thought they got to be licensed too. I was shocked that they weren't. And then looking from the health standpoint, the places that we couldn't even inspect. Mm-hmm. Now some of that, it's all going to cost dollars. Mm-hmm. But it's going to cost dollars if we don't do it as well.
Correct. And obviously the protection of our vulnerable adults who aren't in a position to be able to protect themselves.
Right. Go ahead, Randy.
The next is just to introduce Sarah Seek. And Sarah is our office support person. How many years, Sarah?
8 years almost.
8 years. Sarah is our can-do person. And she is willing and able and just is our can-do. I can't explain and describe her any different than that. Probably in 2018, one of our highlights with Sarah and the work that she did is CaseWorks. As you all know, CaseWorks is our new electronic system, and Sarah was just right in the mix of all that, and really being able to look at our business processes and being able to help us as a team be able to move forward in utilizing CaseWorks to to our benefit. And so she definitely provides daily support to us in my unit. So, if I could just end with on just some highlight, and I would say that my highlight is obviously this group of people. My highlight is these people who on a day-to-day basis do work in situations that are very, very difficult and in situations that there isn't any easy answer to. And I know that sometimes they go home on having to wonder, have I done enough to get people to tomorrow? And they take that home with them. And it's hard work to do, and I appreciate the work they do on a daily basis. And they are my highlight.
Thank you, Corinne, and especially thank you to all of you again. Echo Corinne's words; they're appreciated very much. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Jenny, anything further?
Just was going to make a highlight that DHS has published a request for proposal for our managed care organization contracts. So the people who receive medical assistance and Minnesota Care from our counties, and we have an internal review team that has been working on reviewing and evaluating the different health plans that have come in to see what recommendations we have and which ones we feel will best serve our county. So at the next board meeting, I will have our recommendations and asking for your guys' support as this is due back to them on the 25th of June.
I knew it was coming in 19.
Yes.
We are adjourned.